My name is Amina Reed. 10 years ago, my sister left her newborn on my doorstep. My parents told me, "He's your burden now." So I raised him. I loved him. I built a life for us. Last week, they all came back. My sister, her new white husband, and my parents. They're suing me for custody. They didn't just show up. They showed up after my son's biological father, a dead billionaire, left him a $500 million inheritance. They think they're coming for a payday. They don't know I've been keeping a decade's worth of receipts, and I'm about to cash them all in. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. And hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the responsible one in the family, the one who had to clean up everyone else's mess. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. My name is Amina Reed, and at 2:17 in the morning, my life shattered. The screen of my laptop was the only light in my small Decatur apartment. The lines of code and data tables blurred together. I was 28 years old trying to build a business, read analytics from nothing. I was deep in a complex predictive model for a logistics client trying to find the signal in the noise. The irony is, I was literally analyzing risk metrics when my own life was about to implode. The only sound in the apartment was the hum of the hard drive and the rhythmic lash of the April rain against the single window. It was a lonely sound, one I had gotten used to. Then the sound came. It was not a knock. It was a bang. A fist hitting my solid wood door hard enough to vibrate the wall. Bam, bam, bam. My heart didn't just jump. It stopped. I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I lived alone on the third floor of a walk-up. No one came to my apartment at 2 in the morning. Ever. Especially not like this. The banging came again, harder this time, more desperate, frantic. Bam! 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 My blood ran cold, a sudden icy shock that started in my chest and shot down my arms. I slid my chair back, my stockinged feet, silent on the cold hardwood floor. My mind raced, flipping through 1,000 terrifying possibilities. Was it a robbery? A break-in? Had someone followed me home from the grocery store? No, that was ridiculous. My mind instantly jumped to the most likely, and in some ways most dreaded, option. Kendra. My sister. It was exactly her brand of chaos. But the last I'd heard, she was somewhere in Florida. Or maybe it was Alabama. She wouldn't be here. Would she? The banging stopped, and the silence that followed was somehow louder and more terrifying than the noise had been. I stood in the middle of my living room, which was also my dining room and my office, and just listened. The only sound was my own blood roaring in my ears and the incessant rain. I crept toward the door, my breath held tight in my chest. I grabbed the heaviest thing I owned from the garage sale coffee table, a thick square glass ashtray my grandfather had once used. It felt cold and pathetic in my hand. What was I going to do? Brain a burglar? I stood there for a full minute, my ear pressed to the wood, my heart pounding against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Nothing. Not a single sound from the hallway. I was convinced I was imaging things, that the exhaustion and the caffeine were finally making me hallucinate. I was about to turn away to convince myself it was a neighbor's fight when I looked at the peephole, the tiny brass circle in the center of my door. I leaned forward, my eye pressing against the glass, and peered out. Nothing. Just the dim, flickering fluorescent light of the empty beige hallway. It smelled like stale cigarettes and pine sol as always. But then I saw it. Wet footprints. Not just a few, but a frantic, overlapping mess of them right in front of my mat. Someone had been there. Adrenaline surged through me again. I backed away from the door, slowly, my knuckles white as I gripped the glass ashtray. I stared at the door, at the multiple locks I had insisted the landlord install. They suddenly seemed as thin as paper. I was alone, and someone had been pounding on my door with violent force, and now they were gone. I waited, watching my own shaky reflection in the dark glass of the window, and then I heard it. It was not a bang, it was not a footstep, it was a sound so small it barely registered. A thin, high-pitched whimper, like a kitten trapped somewhere. My blood, which had been frozen by fear, now ran cold with a different kind of dread. The sound was coming from outside my door. The ashtray suddenly felt useless. I placed it on the small entryway table, my hands shaking. The whimper came again, weaker this time, almost swallowed by the sound of the wind and the rain. I crept back to the door. My eye went to the peephole again. Still nothing but the empty beige hallway. But the sound was coming from below the peephole. From the floor. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. No answer. Just that tiny, miserable sound. My fingers, trembling, fumbled with the safety chain. I kept it latched. I slowly, carefully drew back the deadbolt. The click of the lock sounded like a gunshot in the 2 a.m. silence. I opened the door just an inch, the heavy metal chain catching hard, pulling the wood tight. It was just enough to see. I peered through the gap. Nothing. The hallway was empty. "Hello?" I said again, louder, and I looked down. I stopped breathing. At first, my brain simply refused to process what I was seeing. On my worn-out welcome mat, soaked from the April rain, was not a box. It was a cheap plastic baby carrier. The kind you buy at a discount store, not the kind you see on mommy blogs. It was faded blue plastic, and it was slick with rain. A thin, wet towel, not even a blanket, was draped over the top. And it was moving. The whimper was coming from inside. "Oh my God!" The words were just air. My fear vanished, replaced by a surge of pure animalistic panic. I fumbled with the chain, my fingers slipping on the brass. It wouldn't unlatch. The baby cried again, a sound of pure misery. Okay, I'm coming," I whispered, finally dropping the chain. I threw the door open, grabbed the entire cold, wet carrier and pulled it inside. I didn't check the hallway. I didn't look for anyone. I slammed the door shut, locking the deadbolt and the chain again. The apartment was silent except for my own ragged breathing and the storm outside. I stared at the basket, now dripping dirty water onto my clean floor. And then I saw the note. It wasn't on paper. It was a cocktail napkin stuffed into the handle. The ink from the bar's logo, the drunken goet, was bleeding into the text. The words were written in smeared black eyeliner. "Amina, I can't. You're the only one. His name is Leo. Don't find me. Kendra." My breath left my body in a single painful rush. It was all I could think. Kendra, my sister, my parents' perfect broken princess, the golden child who had flamed out, who had chosen drugs and worthless men over everything. And now she had left this. She had left him. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely unlock my phone. Leo. Leo. That's what the note said. He had started to cry, a thin, desperate wail that mirrored the panic rising in my throat. I was on the floor trying to wrap him in a dry towel, his tiny body so cold, so terrifyingly still just moments before. I was trying to rub some life into his purple feet. I dialed the only number I could think of. The immaculate, sprawling home in Buckhead. The zip code that separated us was more than just miles. It was a different universe. My thumb hovered over their name. I hadn't spoken to them in 3 weeks. Not since the last fight about Kendra. Not since I finally said no. I had refused to send her another $500 for her rent money I knew was going straight to her addiction or to some man. My mother's voice still echoed in my ear. "You're stingy, Amina," she'd said, her voice sharp. "You have no compassion for your own family. What has that college degree done to you? Made you cold." Cold. I was the one who was cold. I hit the call button. The baby was screaming now, a raw, piercing sound in my silent apartment. It rang. Once, twice, 4 times. I almost hung up. Then she picked up. "Amina, my mother Maria." Her voice was thick with sleep, but even half awake, it dripped with irritation. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" The question was a slap even before the real one came. I couldn't form words. I just sobbed. "Mom," I finally choked out. "Mom, it's Kendra. She was here. She left her baby. She left a baby on my doorstep." I was pacing the phone, pressed hard to my ear, the baby held tight against my chest. "A newborn. He's freezing. We have to call the police. We have to find her, Mom, please." There was silence on the line. Not a "what?" or "is he okay?" or "we're on our way." Just dead cold silence. It stretched for so long I thought the line had dropped. I heard a muffled sound, my mother's hand over the receiver. I heard her hiss, "David, get up, it's about Kendra." Again. That single word, "again," felt like a knife. Then a new voice. My father, David Reed, not sleepy, not panicked, instantly alert and instantly cold. "Amina," he said, his voice clipped and all business. "What did you say?" I repeated it, the words tumbling out. "Kendra left her baby, on my floor. We have to call the police." "No." The word was absolute. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. "No police!" I was stunned. "What? But she abandoned—" "I said no police!" He cut me off, his voice rising. "I will not have the Reed family name dragged through the mud again. I will not have my business partners and our pastor reading about this in the Atlanta Journal. That girl—" he spat the word, "has ruined our reputation in the church community enough." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't about a person, it was about reputation. "But," I whispered, looking down at the tiny, screaming face. "But the baby, your grandchild." The phone was fumbled again. I heard my mother's voice back on the line, but the sleepiness was gone. It was replaced by a voice as cold and hard as steel. A voice I knew all too well, the voice of finality. "She chose your door, Amina," she said, her voice cutting me to the bone. "That makes it your problem. He is your burden now." "Burden," I whispered. "We will tell everyone," she continued, steamrolling over me, "that Kendra is in a private rehabilitation facility in Europe. That is the story. Do not call this house about this again." The click was deafening. They hung up. I stood there motionless, the phone still pressed to my ear. The baby's wail was a sharp, piercing siren in my small apartment, but it was almost drowned out by the other sound. The sound in my ear, the dial tone. A long, dead, empty hum. That was it. The sound of my family severing the last thread. They hadn't just hung up, they had disconnected. They had unplugged me from the very idea of family. "He is your burden now." My mother's words. They echoed in the silence between the baby's cries. "Your burden." The words bounced off the walls of my cheap Decatur apartment, off the stacks of data analysis textbooks, and the second-hand sofa. My burden. I looked down at the tiny, shivering creature in the towel, who was now turning a brighter, angrier shade of red. The words, they didn't just hurt. They landed with the sickening thud of absolute truth. Not his truth, my truth. This was my role. It had always been my role. I was the responsible one. I was the family's fail-safe, the one who never broke, so I was the one who could be safely ignored. I was the one who got the full academic scholarship to Spelman College. I was the one who graduated summa cum laude while working 2 part-time jobs to pay for my books and my rent, because my parents' money was always tight. I was the one who was currently sitting on a mountain of $80,000 in student loan debt, a debt I had taken on all by myself. And Kendra, our princess, our golden child, the one they did pay for. They paid for her to attend that fancy private liberal arts college up in New England. The one with the ivy-covered walls and the $1,000 acceptance fee. She lasted exactly 1 year. She dropped out to find herself, which apparently meant finding a series of deadbeat boyfriends and a nasty, expensive drug habit. But did her funding stop? No. Even now, at 26, even with her life in flames, I knew for a fact my father still paid the insurance on her red convertible. A car she had probably sold for parts or wrecked months ago. I was the responsible one who had to pay for my own success. Kendra was the irresponsible one who got rewarded for her failures. The baby's cry intensified a desperate lung-filling scream that pulled me from the memory. But it didn't pull me into sadness. A different feeling was rising in my chest. a hot, acidic rage that burned my throat. It wasn't just anger at Kendra for her weakness, for her selfishness. It was a pure, unfiltered fury at my parents, at David and Maria Reed. They chose. In that moment, with that click of the phone, they had made their choice. And they didn't choose me. They didn't choose this innocent, helpless child. They chose their image. They chose their reputation. They chose the pristine, quiet carpets of their Buckhead home. They chose the lie they could tell their friends at the country club, the sad, respectable story of a daughter in rehab in Europe. They chose protecting the idea of their family over the actual people in it. They had abandoned us both. The baby's cry, sharp and desperate, sliced right through my rage. It grounded me. I looked down at him, this tiny 7-pound stranger, now wrapped in my good bath towel. He was still red, his face crumpled in pure primal need. And the logical part of my brain, the data analyst in me, screamed one word. CPS. Child Protective Services. It was the answer. It was the only answer that made sense. I was a 28-year-old woman trying to launch a business. I lived on instant ramen and stale coffee. I was sitting on $80,000 in student loan debt. I had no money for diapers. I had no skills for motherhood. I had no time. My entire future was balanced on a knife's edge, depending on the very clients I was supposed to be coding for at that exact moment. Keeping him was not a logical option. It was a statistical impossibility. It was a risk metric I could not afford to take. This was not my life. This was not my mistake to fix. He was a burden, just as my mother had said. My legs felt like cement as I stood up. I gently placed him on the cushions of my second-hand sofa, surrounding him with pillows so he wouldn't roll. He immediately screamed louder, his tiny body rigid with protest. I know, I muttered, walking backward toward the kitchen. My hands were shaking. I just needed a glass of water. I just needed to think. I reached the kitchen, a tiny alcove with a sink and a refrigerator, and I saw it. Tacked to the corkboard under a takeout menu was a magnet. A small square magnet with the number for the Georgia Division of Family and Children Services. I had gotten it last year when I thought about reporting my neighbors for fighting. I had never used it. My hands, still trembling, reached for my phone, which was still clutched in my left hand. My thumb hovered over the keypad. One call, and I could undo this. I could give him to people who were paid to handle this. I could get my life back. And then the crying stopped. The sudden absolute silence was more shocking than the screaming had been. I turned around, my heart pounding. He was just watching me. From the sofa, his head turned toward the kitchen light. He wasn't screaming. He was just staring with these impossibly wide, dark, ancient-looking eyes. As I stood there frozen, he made a tiny movement. One of his hands, a fist no bigger than a walnut, uncurled. He splayed his tiny fingers open. I couldn't move. I felt pulled. I walked back, my phone forgotten. I sat on the floor in front of him. I hesitated. Then I slowly, uncertainly offered him my index finger. He gripped it. His entire hand, all 5 perfect fingers, wrapped around the tip of my finger with a strength that was impossible. A grip so tight it sent a jolt straight from my hand to my heart. It was a shock, electric and warm. And in that one tiny, powerful gesture, everything shattered. The rage, the logic, the data, my mother's voice. All of it just evaporated. And I realized they were wrong. My parents were wrong. The world was wrong. This was not a burden. This was not a problem. This was a person. This was family. And my real family, David and Maria Reed, the ones who were supposed to protect me, they had just abandoned both of us. He had no one. And in that moment I realized neither did I. We were the same. We were the leftovers. I looked down at his hand, still wrapped tightly around my finger. Okay, Leo. I whispered the name, feeling strange and perfect on my tongue. Okay, it's just you and me. We're going to be okay. The first week was a blur. A fog of formula. I did not know how to mix diapers, I did not know how to put on, and a high-pitched crying sound I could not seem to stop. I had not slept in what felt like 100 years. My small apartment, once my clean, organized sanctuary and office, was now a disaster zone. It was a battlefield of half-empty bottles, unfolded baby blankets, and a profound, lingering smell of sour milk. Leo was asleep finally, a small, fragile weight in the brand-new bassinet that had cost me half of my grocery budget for the entire month. I was sitting at my laptop, the screen glaring at me, but I could not focus on the code. My client was waiting. I was exhausted, but my mind would not shut off. It kept replaying that night. The knock, the rain, the note, the click of the phone, and something did not fit. My professional instincts, the part of my brain that sees patterns in chaos, just would not let it go. I am a data analyst. My entire career is built on finding the signal in the noise. And this entire situation was noise. Kendra's disappearance, it was not just desperate, it felt clean. She had vanished from the face of the earth. No follow-up calls, no desperate texts for money, no social media trail. And my parents, their rejection was too fast. It was too scripted. "He's your burden now." It was not a response spoken in panic. It was a verdict, a pre-written decision. My analyst brain told me I was missing a key variable, the catalyst. What happened in the 48 hours before she came to my door? I sat up, rubbing my burning eyes. I needed data. But I had nothing. No phone records, no access to her accounts, nothing. Then I remembered. The old account. The Student Advantage checking account my parents had co-signed for me back when I started at Spelman. In case of emergency, my father had said, which I always knew really meant, in case we need to monitor your spending. I never used it anymore. But I had been funneling money from my freelance side contracts into it for 3 years. It was supposed to be my seed money, my escape fund for Reed Analytics. I knew with a sick feeling that my parents still had access to it. My hands were shaking. I had not logged into that account in 6 months. I typed in the password, my old college mascot. The page loaded slowly, the little blue circle spinning. I expected it to be empty or close to it, a few $100s maybe. But the balance that loaded on the screen made my heart stop. It was not just low, it was almost zero. I felt the blood drain from my face. I scrolled down the transaction history past my small deposits. And then I saw it. A single line item that made me feel like I was falling. A wire withdrawal. Not an ATM, not a debit card swipe. A formal authorized wire transfer. The amount $50,000. I stared at the number, my brain refusing to process it. 50,000. That was my money. That was my savings. That was my future. And then I saw the date. The date of the transaction. It was not a week ago. It was not a month ago. It was dated April 4th, 10 years ago. Exactly 2 days before Leo appeared on my doorstep. My heart was no longer pounding from exhaustion. It was hammering. A sick, heavy thud against my ribs. $50,000. The number just sat there on the screen, digital and damning. It did not make sense. I scrolled down, my mouse clicking frantically in the silent apartment past my small, careful deposits from freelance work. I needed the details. I needed the data. I clicked on the transaction line. Expand details. The page refreshed slowly. Wire withdrawal, it said. Okay, so a withdrawal. But to who? I scanned the line, looking for Kendra's name, looking for an account in Florida, anything that would make sense. I found the authorization line, and the world tilted. Authorized signature David Reed. My father. Not Kendra. My father. The blood drained from my face and a cold metallic taste filled my mouth. I must have read the line 10 times, blinking, willing the letters to rearrange themselves. David Reed. David Reed. David Reed. It was not a mistake. It was not a bank error. It was a name I knew better than my own. He had logged in. He had seen my balance. And he had taken it. $50,000. That was not just a number. That was my future. That was Reed Analytics. That was my seed money. That was 2 years of late nights skipping dinners, saying no to friends, and coding until my eyes burned. That was my money. They had not just taken some money, they had taken my money. The money I, the responsible one, had saved while they were paying for Kendra's rehab, which was probably just a spa and her convertible. The pieces clicked into place, sharp and painful like broken glass. My brain, the analyst, started running the simulation, the real timeline. Variable 1. Kendra is pregnant and desperate. Variable 2. My parents are terrified of the scandal. Variable 3. They need her to disappear quietly and quickly. Variable 4. They need money to make her disappear. Variable 5. Their responsible daughter has an emergency fund they can access. My God. They did not just reject me when I called. That call was just the final step. They had planned this. They had orchestrated this entire tragedy. They had paid my sister to abandon her child. They had paid her to run, and they had used my future to finance the cover-up. They used my savings to protect their reputation, to keep the neighbors in Buckhead from whispering at the church bake sale. The rage that rose in my throat was so hot, so acidic, I almost choked on it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my laptop against the wall. I wanted to pick up the phone and dial that Buckhead number and unleash 10 years of fury. But I did not. The analyst took over. The cold, logical part of me that sees patterns and plans for the future. Rage is temporary. Data is forever. My hands, still shaking, moved from the trackpad to the keyboard. I did not yell. I did not cry. I clicked print. I printed the bank statement. I saved the page as a PDF. I saved the wire transfer confirmation. I opened my secure cloud drive, created a new folder, and encrypted it. I named it Receipt, because I finally understood. This was not an abandonment. This was not a family tragedy. This was a settlement. It was a cold, hard business transaction, and they had just made me the unwilling financier. But I had the proof. I had the evidence. I had the receipt. 2 years went by, just like that. I was 30 years old and Leo was 2. He was no longer a tiny, fragile bundle. He was a force of nature. A hilarious, stubborn, brilliant little boy who was running me ragged. He had my sister's eyes, but he had my determination. My company, Reed Analytics, was still alive, but just barely. It was limping, not growing. I was trying to be a full-time CEO and a full-time mom, which meant I was doing both jobs at 50%, and I was haunted by the constant crushing feeling of failing both. My apartment was a controlled chaos of sippy cups, data entry spreadsheets, and half-finished projects. I loved my life, but I was exhausted down to my bones. In those 2 years, I had not seen my parents. Not once. Not since the night they hung up on me. The night they called their own grandson a burden. The silence from their house in Buckhead was absolute. Well, almost. I had received exactly 2 pieces of mail from them. A Christmas card. And then another one the next year. They were beautiful, expensive cards with snowy landscapes and gold foil. Inside there was no note, no phone call, no check, which I knew for a fact they used to send Kendra. Not even a handwritten signature, just the pre-printed embossed words, "From David and Maria Reed." It was the ultimate performance. It was their way of telling the postman they were a normal, loving family, while simultaneously telling me that I was still nothing. I kept the cards. I filed them away in the same encrypted folder as the bank receipt. More evidence. Then, on a random Tuesday in November just before Thanksgiving, my phone buzzed. I was trying to get Leo to eat green beans. I glanced at the caller ID and my heart just stopped. Maria Reed. My mother. After 2 years of complete, total silence, she was calling me. I almost let it go to voicemail. I almost threw the phone. Leo, seeing my face, threw his green beans on the floor. My hand was shaking. I swiped to answer. "Hello?" I said. My voice sounded weak, small. Amina, she said. Her voice was bright, casual, as if we had spoken just yesterday. As if she had not disowned me over the phone while I held a freezing newborn. I was just thinking, it's been so long. You really should stop being so childish. I was speechless. I was literally speechless. I was being childish. This childishness has gone on long enough, Amina. She continued, her voice full of fake magnanimous grace, as if she were the bigger person. It's Thanksgiving. It's time for family. You should bring the baby to dinner. Your father wants to see him. I almost laughed. It was such a blatant, absurd lie. Your father wants to see him. My father, David Reed, had never once asked about my well-being, let alone the child he had called a burden. My father cared about his golf score, his reputation, and his respectable image. He had made his choice clear. This was not an olive branch. This was a command performance. They wanted to pretend to their friends that they were doting grandparents, and they needed a prop. They needed Leo. My blood boiled. The analyst in me, the part that had saved the receipt, screamed, "It's a trap! Hang up!" But then I looked at Leo. He had a green bean stuck to his cheek and he was grinning at me. He was 2. He was innocent. He did not know about my parents' coldness. He did not know about the $50,000. He just knew love, and he deserved a family. Did he not deserve to know his grandparents, even if they were them? A tiny, foolish, stupid part of me, a part I thought had died on the phone 2 years ago, whispered, maybe. Maybe if they saw him, maybe if they held him, maybe that would be enough to change their hearts. Okay, Mom, I said, my voice quiet, hating myself for the hope I heard in it. We'll be there. I drove to Buckhead on Thanksgiving Day, my stomach twisted in knots. I spent an hour I did not have dressing Leo. I put him in his best outfit, a tiny button-down shirt, and little khaki pants I had bought just for this. I combed his curls until they shone. I wanted him to look perfect. I wanted just for a second to prove them wrong. I wanted to show them he was not a burden, but a blessing. The hope I felt was stupid. I knew it was stupid even as I felt it. When my mother Maria opened the massive polished oak door of their Buckhead home, I knew it was a mistake. The house smelled exactly as I remembered: expensive polished roast turkey, sweet potatoes, and cold judgment. She was wearing a silk blouse, gold jewelry, and pearls. To carve a turkey, in her own home. She did not hug me. She did not smile. She did not even look at me. Her eyes went straight down past my face to the 2-year-old standing at my knee. Leo, being 2, had pulled his shoes off in the car. His little white socks were clean, but they were just socks. My mother's face tightened, that pinched, disappointed look that had defined my entire childhood. "Amina," she said, her voice a low hiss of disapproval. "You could not even bother to put shoes on him. He looks unkempt. Not hello, not welcome, not, 'It's been 2 years.' Just criticism right there on the doorstep." I felt my shoulders slump. "He pulled them off in the car, Mom," I said, my voice already small. "He's 2. She just sniffed a sharp, dismissive sound. "Well, try to control him. Your father had the floors polished." The dinner was torture. It was a performance for an audience of 3. My father David sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, radiating success. He was in his element, carving the turkey, talking loudly about his golf game. And he praised Kendra. Oh, how he praised the daughter who was not there. "We received a postcard from Paris," he announced, beaming at my mother, who beamed back. "Kendra is doing so well. She's thinking of taking a cordon bleu cooking class. So refined. It is just wonderful to see her finding her passion." I stared at the crystal water glass, my throat tightening. Paris. That was the lie they had built over my stolen $50,000. A cooking class. She was probably in a ditch in Florida, but here in Buckhead she was refined. My father then turned his attention to me, his smile fading. And you, Amina, still doing that? That little computer job? The word computer job was so demeaning. He knew I ran my own company. He knew I was a data analyst, but he reduced it to nothing a child's hobby. I thought with a child, he continued, you would want something more stable, something with benefits. I was trying to cut a piece of turkey small enough for Leo, my hands shaking with a quiet rage. It's going fine, Dad, I muttered. Leo, sensing the tension in the room, did what 2-year-olds do. He banged his little fork on the table, and then with a joyful squeal, he flipped his plate. It was not a big spill. A single spoonful of mashed sweet potato landed on the edge of their priceless Persian rug. My mother screamed. It was not a yell, it was a sharp, horrified shriek, as if he had set the house on fire. Oh my God, Amina, that carpet is ruined. Can you not control that child for one single minute? I was on my knees, instantly trying to scoop up the orange mush with a napkin, my face burning with humiliation. Leo, terrified by the scream, burst into tears, a high-pitched, frightened wail. That is it. My father's voice cut through the crying. He put his napkin down his face, a mask of pure disgust. He was not looking at me. He was looking at Leo. Amina, he said, his voice cold as ice. Get your things. I packed our diaper bag in silence, my hands shaking, Leo sobbing against my shoulder. As I walked to the front door, my father was there holding a foil-wrapped plate of leftovers. He held it out to me, not making eye contact. Here, do not say we did not feed you. And then he delivered the final blow. And next time you are invited, he said, his voice low. If you decide to come, you come alone. That baby he is too much noise. This is a respectable house. He shut the door before I could even reply, leaving me and my son standing in the cold. 3 more years went by. Just like that. 3 years of absolute unbroken silence from Buckhead. I was 33 and Leo was 5. He was a bright spark of a boy obsessed with dinosaurs and learning to read. My company, Read Analytics, was finally taking off. I had clients, I had contracts, I had 80-hour work weeks. Life was a frantic, exhausting, beautiful blur of client meetings, data models, kindergarten drop-offs, and macaroni and cheese. I was succeeding not despite Leo, but because of him. I was building a fortress for us, one line of code at a time. I was tired, bone-deep tired, but we were happy. The crisis started on a Tuesday. Leo was fine in the morning. By the afternoon, the school called. He feels warm. By the time I picked him up, warm was an understatement. He was burning. By 8 p.m., his fever was 104. 104. A number that does not look real on a digital thermometer. He was lethargic, his neck was stiff, and he was crying in a way that I had never heard before. A high-pitched, painful wail that terrified me. I called the pediatrician's after-hours line. I described the symptoms. The doctor did not hesitate. His voice was urgent, cutting through my panic. Amina, I don't want to scare you, but a fever that high with a stiff neck, I'm concerned about meningitis. You need to get him to Eagleston. Immediately. Meningitis. Eagleston. Immediately. The 3 words were like a bomb. Eagleston was the serious hospital, the one you never wanted to go to. I do not remember the drive. I do not remember parking. I just remember the fluorescent hell of the emergency room at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. I was surrounded by people, by crying kids and exhausted parents, but I had never felt so completely and totally alone. They took him back, a nurse, whisking him away to a triage room, and I was left in the waiting area, my hands shaking so hard I could not fill out the forms. My phone felt like a 1,000-pound weight in my hand. I was a 33-year-old CEO. I was a competent, successful woman. But in that moment, I was just a terrified girl. I scrolled through my contacts, past my clients, past my lawyer, past the kindergarten, and I found the number. Maria Reed. I had not deleted it. After 3 years of silence, after the respectable house comment, after everything, my thumb shaking pressed the call button. I did not even think. It was a reflex, a deep, primal, stupid need for my mother. She picked up on the second ring, her voice clear and alert as if she were at a book club. Amina. The word was a dam breaking. I just shattered. Mom, I sobbed, the sound torn from my chest, my voice cracking. Mom, Leo, he's really sick. I was pacing the waiting room, earning annoyed glances. They said it might be meningitis. I leaned my forehead against the cold, germ-covered wall. We're at Eggleston. I'm at Eggleston, Mom. And I'm scared. I'm really, really scared. There was a pause, but it was not a worried pause. It was not the sound of a mother absorbing a shock. It was a cold, calculating, annoyed silence. I heard the faint, distant tink of silverware on a china plate. I heard the murmur of other voices in the background, light social laughter. She was not just at home. She was busy. I heard the distinct sound of her hand covering the receiver, the shift in acoustics, and then her muffled, irritated hiss to someone else in the room. David, she whispered, her voice sharp, it's Amina. There was another pause. I could imagine my father looking up from his newspaper, annoyed at the interruption. It's about that child, she hissed. Again. That one word. Again. As if my 5-year-old son, her only grandchild, was not a person, but a recurring technical problem. A broken appliance. A bill she did not want to pay. Then her hand moved. Her voice came back on the line, but the polite socialite tone was gone. It was replaced by that cold, hard buckhead voice. The voice she used on incompetent waiters and clumsy gardeners. Amina, she said, and her voice was sharp like ice. I am in the middle of my annual women's club luncheon. I am the host. There are 30 women in my living room. I cannot just leave. I could not process the words. My brain simply refused. What? I whispered, my voice cracking. A luncheon. Mom, did you hear me? They said meningitis. I don't care about the luncheon. I am at the hospital. I am alone. I need someone. Please. I was begging. I hated the sound of my own voice, the pathetic, pleading tone. Please, just... Dad. Where is Dad? Can he come? I heard her sigh, a long, drawn-out sound of pure exasperation. Your father, she said, as if explaining something to a very stupid child, is exactly where he is supposed to be on a Tuesday afternoon. He is golfing. He has clients on the course from New York. We cannot just drop our entire lives, Amina, every time you overreact. That word, overreact. My son was behind a closed door with doctors. His temperature was 104. They were worried about his brain, and I was overreacting. I am not overreacting. I yelled, my voice finally breaking, causing a woman in the waiting room to look up at me. He is sick. Mom, I am scared. Amina, you always do this. She said, her voice flat, devoid of all emotion. You are always dramatic. You know how children are. They get fevers. 99% of the time, it is just a virus. It will be fine. You need to learn to handle your own responsibilities. I need my mom, I cried, the last of my pride gone. No, she said. Her voice was final. You need to stop being so selfish. You made this choice. You chose him. Now you handle it. I have guests. Click. The dial tone hummed in my ear. She had done it again. She had hung up on me. I stood there in the middle of the Eggleston emergency room, my phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. She hung up on me. My 5-year-old son was somewhere behind a set of double doors, potentially with a life-threatening illness, and my mother hung up on me because of a luncheon. The sound of the ER, the crying babies, the beeping machines, the overhead announcements, it all rushed back in, deafening me. I was completely, utterly alone. I slid down the wall, a wall painted a sickly green, and just sat. I sat on the germ-covered floor of the emergency room surrounded by strangers, and I felt invisible. Those 12 hours were the longest of my life. I watched the digital clock on the wall tick over each minute an eternity. 12:30, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. I watched other families come and go. I watched a father holding his son's hand as he got stitches. I bought a coffee from a vending machine that tasted like burnt plastic and chemicals. I answered a client email on my phone, my hands shaking, pretending my world was not falling apart. Every time a nurse or a doctor walked through the double doors, my head snapped up, my heart leaping into my throat. Amina Reed. No, not yet. We're still waiting on the blood work. I must have paced a marathon in that tiny, cold waiting room. I thought about my mother's words. Overreacting. Selfish. You chose him. I had. I had chosen him. And in doing so, I had been unchosen by them. The finality of it settled on me heavy and cold as a lead blanket. Finally, at 3 in the morning, a doctor with kind, exhausted eyes came through the doors. Amina. For Leo. I leaped up, my legs numb. Yes, is he okay? My voice was a croak. He gave me a small, tired smile. He is going to be fine. It is not meningitis. I almost collapsed. The relief was so absolute, so total, it buckled my knees. Thank God, I whispered. He continued. It's a severe bacterial infection, but we've started him on a high-dose IV antibiotic. He's responding well. He's sleeping. You can see him in a few minutes. I just nodded, the tears I had been holding back for 12 hours finally breaking free. I did not cry for sadness. I cried because the terror was over and I had survived it, alone. We spent 2 days in the hospital. I slept in a plastic chair. I held his hand. I read him dinosaur stories. My business almost imploded. I pushed back 3 client deadlines. I ate vending machine crackers for dinner. And I did it. We did it. We got to go home. We were back in our safe place. Leo was asleep in his own bed, clutching his stuffed triceratops. I was sitting on my sofa covered in hospital grime, feeling like I had run a marathon. My phone pinged. A text message. It was from Mom. My heart stupidly gave a little jump. Was it an apology? Was she checking in? I opened it. The text read, Amina. Heard Leo just had a little cold after all. So glad you didn't overreact too much. Hope he's feeling better. By the way, your father just signed that big New York contract he was working on. We're all going to our favorite restaurant tonight to celebrate. You should have seen his golf game. I read the text, and then I read it again. A little cold. Overreact. Celebrate. They did not just not care. They were rubbing it in. They were celebrating a golf game and a business deal while I had been in a living hell, terrified my son was dying. They had not called. They had not checked. They just sent this victory lap. I looked at the words. I thought of the dial tone in the ER. I thought of the 12 hours on the cold floor. I thought of luncheon. I thought of selfish. And I felt nothing. The part of me that had been waiting for them to be parents, the part that had foolishly called them, had finally died. It was over. I was done. My thumb steady now opened my contact list. I found her name, Maria Reed. I pressed the info button. I scrolled down. Block this caller. I pressed it. Block contact. Confirmed. Then I scrolled down to David Reed. Block this caller. Confirmed. I dropped the phone on the cushion. I was done. 3 more years went by. Just like that. 3 years of absolute unbroken silence from Buckhead. I was 36 and Leo was 8. He was a bright spark of a boy obsessed with dinosaurs and learning to read. My company, Reed Analytics, was finally taking off. I had clients. I had contracts. I had 80-hour work weeks. Life was a frantic, exhausting, beautiful blur of client meetings, data models, kindergarten drop-offs, and macaroni and cheese. I was succeeding not despite Leo, but because of him. I was building a fortress for us, one line of code at a time. We were happy. We had moved out of that small, dark Decatur apartment. We were in a good school district in a nice 2-story brick house in Alpharetta. It had a backyard, a tire swing I had hung myself, and a small home office where I was finally truly my own boss. The stability was real. We were safe. But there was one last cloud. A piece of paper. A legal technicality that felt like a crack in the foundation of the fortress I had built. Kendra's name. Her name still sitting on his birth certificate. It was a lie. It was a ghost in our happy home. Every time I had to register him for school or a new doctor or sign him up for soccer, there it was. Mother's name Kendra Reed. Father's name unknown. And I, Amina Reed, was just a line item at the bottom. Guardian. I was not his guardian. I was his mother. I had been his mother through the 2 a.m. feedings, the fevers, the first day of kindergarten, the nightmares. And now, at 8 years old, Leo was starting to notice. He could read. He would point at the paper. Mom, why does it say her name? Why not yours? I finally made the call. I sat in the leather-backed chair of a family law office. My lawyer, Jessica Hayes, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who handled my business contracts, looked at the file I had prepared. I want to make it official, Jessica, I said, my voice firm. I want to adopt him, fully. I want his last name to be Reed. I want my name to be on that line. Jessica nodded, her face serious. She looked at the timeline I'd prepared. The bank statement from 10 years ago. The call log from the hospital. The unopened Christmas cards. Amina, she said, her voice clear and strong. This is not a hard case. This is a simple one. She started ticking off the points. It has been 8 years. Has Kendra Reed ever contacted you? No, I said. Not once. Has she ever sent $1 of support, a birthday card? Nothing, I confirmed. And your parents, David and Maria? I just laughed, a short, bitter sound. No. The opposite. Jessica leaned forward. Amina, what you have here is what the state of Georgia calls a clear case of abandonment. Legally, this is straightforward. She has not contacted the child in over a year. She has provided no support. She has, by all legal definitions, forfeited her rights. The word forfeited felt powerful. It was exactly what had happened. So we file, Jessica said, all business again. We file a petition to terminate her parental rights based on abandonment. After that, the adoption is a formality. I felt a weight I had not even realized I was carrying lift off my shoulders. It was safe. It was the final step. I had built the life. I had built the company. Now I was just signing the paperwork to make the fortress legally complete. I signed the retainer. I filed the petition. I was 36, Leo was 8, and we were finally officially going to be a family. The legal process was not as simple as just signing a paper. My lawyer, Jessica, was sharp, but the law was specific. To terminate Kendra's rights, Amina, we have to prove we tried to contact her. She explained, her office overlooking the Atlanta skyline. We have to serve her. My blood ran cold. Serve her, Jessica. She's a ghost. She has not been seen in 8 years. Jessica nodded, already ahead of me. I know. So the law has a provision. We serve her at her last known address. When that fails, we serve her closest known relatives, your parents. I felt the air leave my lungs. You're telling them... A new kind of panic set in. My God, Jessica, they'll fight it. They'll show up just to spite me. They'll tell Kendra... Jessica held up a hand. Amina, it is a legal requirement. We have to send a certified letter return receipt requested to their Buckhead address. It's just a formality. A formality. Right. A week later, Jessica called. Amina, she said, her voice neutral. I have the delivery confirmation. It was signed for. By M. Reed, Maria Reed. So, they knew. They officially legally knew that I was moving to make my son my son. The next 2 months of waiting for the court date were agony. I was a wreck. I kept expecting the phone to ring. I kept expecting a lawyer's letter. I kept expecting them to show up at my door to use this as leverage to finally destroy the life I had built. The day in court was cold and gray. I had dressed Leo, now 8, in a little blue suit. He looked so grown up. He was quietly reading a Captain Underpants book in the massive echoing hallway of the Fulton County Courthouse, not understanding the gravity of the moment. I, on the other hand, felt like I was going to be sick. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure people could hear it. I kept looking at the double doors at the end of the hall, expecting them to burst open. Expecting to see my mother's disapproving face, my father's cold glare. "Amina Reed," the bailiff called. We went in. The courtroom was almost empty, just us, Jessica, a judge, and a court stenographer. "All rise," the judge said. A kind-looking woman with tired eyes. I sat, my hands clenched, my eyes still glued to the door. It remained closed. The judge read the petition. Case number 2018 AD 0091. In the matter of the termination of parental rights for Kendra Reed. She looked up over her glasses at the empty room. "This is the time and place for the hearing. Is there anyone here to speak on behalf of Ms. Kendra Reed?" Silence. A deep, heavy, absolute silence. I held my breath. No one. Not a single person. Not Kendra. Not Chad. Not David. Not Maria. They had received the legal notification. They knew the exact date and time, and they had chosen not to come. They did not care enough to even make a phone call to protest. Their absence was the final resounding, "He's your burden." It was their implied consent. The judge looked at the file. The court notes the certified notification was delivered and signed. The parties have failed to appear. She picked up her pen. The petition is uncontested. The parental rights of Kendra Reed are hereby terminated effective immediately. She looked at me and her stern face softened into a smile. "And the petition for adoption by Ms. Amina Reed is granted. Congratulations, Mom." I burst into tears. Not quiet tears, but huge, gasping sobs of 8 years of pent-up fear and exhaustion. I pulled Leo into my arms. "It's official, baby!" I cried into his hair. "It's official. You're Leo Reed. You're my son." I walked out of that courthouse holding my son's hand. He was Leo Reed. I was his mother. Legally. Officially. Finally. I thought it was the end. I thought the fortress was finally secure. I thought we were free. I had no idea. I was so wrong. 2 years. 2 years of blessed, profound, absolute silence. After the adoption, the final invisible thread connecting me to them was severed. And in that silence, we bloomed. I am 38 years old now. Leo is 10. He is no longer a baby, but a bright, funny, sharp-witted boy obsessed with coding of all things. He reads at a high school level and argues with me about network security. Read analytics. My little computer job is no longer a limping one-woman operation. It is a thriving 6-figure consultancy. I have an office in Alpharetta. I have 2 employees. I have respect. And we have this house. A solid brick house on a quiet, tree-lined street with good schools. It is the fortress I promised us, built not of anger, but of late nights, good data, and sheer unadulterated willpower. This was our life now. It was a Sunday in May. The windows were open. I could smell my neighbor's barbecue. I was sitting at my kitchen island, not frantically working, but peacefully reviewing a financial report, a cup of good coffee in my hand. In the backyard, I could hear the rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack of a basketball on the driveway. Leo was practicing. There was no screaming, no tension, no fear. There was just peace. An earned peace. And then the doorbell rang. It was not a frantic 2 a.m. pounding. It was a polite, civilized ding-dong. I put my coffee down, a little annoyed at the interruption. I was expecting a package. I walked to the front door, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors I had picked out myself. I looked through the peephole, and I froze. Everything in me, my blood, my breath, my heart turned to ice. It was her. I had not seen her face in 10 years, not since she was a 26-year-old strung-out mess. But it was her. Kendra. She was 36 now. She looked different. The life she had lived was written all over her face, but it was covered in thick layers of cheap foundation. Her hair was a brittle, bleached blonde. She was wearing a tight designer knockoff dress that was completely inappropriate for a Sunday afternoon. Her eyes, though, her eyes were exactly the same. Empty. Vacant. And she was not alone. Standing next to her with one hand possessively on her arm was a man. He was maybe 38-40. He was white. He wore a shiny, ill-fitting polyester suit that looked like it was trying and failing to be expensive. He had a weak chin and a smile that was less a smile and more of a sneer. His name, I would soon learn, was Chad Peterson. He was exactly the kind of man I knew Kendra would attract. A predator. A bottom feeder. I stood there for a full 30 seconds, my hand on the doorknob, the ice in my veins turning into cold, hard steel. This was not a social call. This was not an "I'm sorry." This was an invasion. I finally slowly opened the door. Kendra flinched when she saw me. She actually took a step back. I just stood there, my face blank. I said nothing. The silence stretched thick and heavy. I looked at her, then at him, then back to her. "Amina," she finally whispered, her voice raspy, unfamiliar. "Hi." I just stared. "Kendra," I said. My voice was not warm, it was not welcoming. It was the voice I used on clients who were trying to break a contract. It was flat, final. "What are you doing here?" The man Chad stepped forward. He physically moved in front of Kendra, puffing out his chest. He was the new mouthpiece. "Hey," he said, the smirk widening, showing teeth that were a little too yellow. "That's no way to greet your sister, is it? I'm Chad Peterson." He stuck out a clammy hand. I ignored it. "We're married," he announced as if he were presenting a prize. "Lawfully. 6 months." He pulled Kendra tight against his side. She looked like a doll, her eyes darting between me and him, terrified. "Amina," Kendra said, her voice a little stronger, like she was reading a script. "I'm sober. I've been clean for a whole year. I've remade my life." Sober. Of course. The magic word. The word that was supposed to erase 10 years of silence, 10 years of raising the son she had abandoned. The word that was supposed to make me forget. I was not impressed. I had seen her sober 3 times before, right before she relapsed and stole my grandmother's jewelry. I'm a different person now, Amina," she said. "I found God. Chad helped me." "That's right," Chad said, his voice dripping with cheap televangelist confidence. He looked past me into my clean, well-lit foyer, his eyes scanning my possessions. I could practically see the dollar signs clicking in his head. He looked at me, his eyes finally settling on my face, and the smirk became a look of pure, unadulterated entitlement. "And we're here," he said, his voice slow and deliberate, "to see the boy." I almost laughed. It was such a hollow, bitter sound. "The boy," I repeated, the casual, dismissive way he said it, like Leo was a piece of lost luggage they were coming to claim. The rage I had held back, the cold, analytical steel, it all just solidified. I looked past Chad, my eyes locking on my sister. "You," I said, my voice low and dangerous, "do not have a boy here. You do not have a son here, Kendra." Her face crumpled. Chad's face darkened. "Hey, now listen," he started. I cut him off. "No, you listen," I said, stepping forward. I was no longer the scared 28-year-old. I was a 38-year-old homeowner, a CEO, and a mother. I was the fortress. You gave up that right 10 years ago, I said, my voice never rising, on a dirty welcome mat in the rain with a note written in eyeliner. You do not get to come back a decade later with a new accessory. I glanced at Chad, and act like you have any claim. He's my son, Kendra suddenly shrieked, the mask of the sober woman cracking, showing the desperate, selfish person I always knew. No, I said, my voice like a gavel. He is my son, legally, officially. His name is Leo Reed. My name is on the birth certificate. You do not exist. Chad's face turned red, a blotchy, ugly color. Now you see here, he snarled, taking a step toward me. We know our rights. We are family. And you can't just keep a child from his real mother. We're here to see him. We're not leaving. I just looked at him. I did not flinch. I did not back down. I pulled my phone from my back pocket. I did not even look at the screen. My fingers knew the numbers. You have exactly 10 seconds to get off my property, I said, my voice as cold as the grave, before I call Alpharetta Police and have you removed for trespassing. He froze. He was a bully, and bullies are cowards. He had not expected this. He had expected the old Amina, the one who would cry, the one who would fold. He looked at Kendra, suddenly furious at her. This is what you're talking about, he hissed. You'll regret this, he finally shouted at me, backing down the walkway, pulling a crying Kendra with him. He was a cornered rat, and he was spitting. You can't do this. Your parents warned us. They warned us you were a selfish bitch. That was it. The final piece of the puzzle, the connection, my parents. You'll be hearing from our lawyer, he screamed from the sidewalk. You haven't heard the last of us. I did not say a word. I just watched them scramble to their old beat-up BMW, and then I shut my solid oak door. I engaged the deadbolt, and I leaned against it, my heart pounding, not with fear, but with the cold, hard certainty of a coming war. The peace was over. I was still shaking. Not from fear, but from a deep, profound rage. I had locked the deadbolt, engaged the security system, and put Leo in his room with his headphones and his favorite video game. He knew something was wrong. He had seen my face. But I could not bring myself to explain that the monsters were real, and they had just been on our clean suburban doorstep. I was standing in my kitchen, my hands gripping the cold granite countertop, just trying to get my breathing to return to normal. The peace of my Sunday. The peace I had spent 10 years building had been shattered in less than 5 minutes. It was gone, replaced by the familiar coppery taste of my family's toxicity. And then my phone rang. It was sitting on the counter, and it vibrated, a harsh, angry buzz against the stone. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. My blood, which was already simmering, ran cold. They would not this fast. I pressed ignore. The screen went dark, and before a second could pass, it lit up again. Unknown number, ringing again immediately. This was not a sales call. This was not a wrong number. This was an ambush. This was a follow-up attack. With a deep breath, I swiped to accept the call. I did not say hello. I just waited, holding the phone to my ear, listening to the dead air. For a second, there was only static. Then I heard a voice that I had not heard in 5 years. A voice I had blocked. A voice I had deleted. A voice that had died to me in the Eagleston Hospital waiting room. Amina, she said. I said nothing. Amina Reed, she shrieked, and the venom, the pure, undiluted fury, was so potent it felt like a physical blow. How dare you? It was my mother, Maria. How dare you call the police on your own sister? She screamed into the phone. My neighbor saw the car. You embarrassed her. You embarrassed him, after everything she has been through, after all the hard work she has done to rebuild her life. I was stunned into silence. What are you talking about, Mom? I finally managed to say. Do not mom me, she yelled. That girl has changed. She is a different person. She is sober. She has a wonderful, supportive new husband, Chad. He is a good man. He is a manager. And there it was. My mother's voice was filled with this strange, twisted pride. I could hear the unspoken word, the word that explained everything. He's white. In my mother's world, The world of the black upper middle class in Buckhead respectability was the only currency. And my sister Kendra, the family's greatest failure, had just landed the ultimate prize. She had secured a white husband. It did not matter if he was a manager at a rental car kiosk, which I was sure he was. It did not matter if he was a bottom feeder in a polyester suit. He was white. And in my mother's eyes, that single fact had redeemed Kendra. It had washed away the addiction, the theft, the abandonment. It proved that Kendra had finally leveled up. And I, by threatening to call the police, had threatened that new, fragile, respectable image. I had embarrassed the white man. The audacity of it, the sheer layered hypocrisy made me sick. This was not a mother calling to check on her daughter after a confrontation. This was a co-conspirator calling to scold me for ruining the plan. This was not a random call. This was calculated. And that is when the coldest realization hit me. "How did you even get this number?" I asked, my voice flat. "And how did they find my house?" The silence on the other end was my answer. "You." I said the words heavy as stones. After 5 years of silence. "You gave them my address, did not you?" "Of course I gave it to them," she shrieked, shameless. "She is her mother. She has a right." "A right," I said, my voice dangerously low. "A right she gave up 10 years ago, Mom. A right you didn't care about when you hung up on me at the hospital." I heard a sharp intake of breath. I had hit the nerve. "You are a cruel, selfish girl, Amina," she hissed. "You always have been, hiding away in your big house, hoarding that child, thinking you are better than us." "I am better than this," I said. "Now get off my phone." "You listened to me," she started, but I heard a muffled sound, a man's voice in the background. "Give me the phone, Maria. She's clearly not listening to you." The phone was fumbled, and a new voice came on the line. A voice I had not heard in 5 years, but one that I recognized as the root of all my pain. My father, David Reed. "Amina," he barked. No greeting, just a command. "Stop this nonsense." "Nonsense," I repeated. "That's what you call this nonsense." "Do not," he growled, "get legalistic with me, young lady. I am your father. I am telling you right now you are making a terrible mistake. You had no right to keep that child." I could not believe what I was hearing. I had no right. I had the right of a decent human being. I had the right of the woman who found him freezing on a doorstep while you and Mom were, where, in Buckhead, hiding. "We were protecting this family," he roared, and I could hear the blood pounding in his voice. "We were protecting you from a scandal, and this is how you repay us. You stole that child, Amina. You took advantage of your sister's illness, her weakest moment, and you stole him from her." That was it. That was the word that broke me. Stole. Stole. I screamed, the rage I had been suppressing for a decade finally erupting, a volcano of pure, unadulterated fury. I stole him. I was the one who was up every 2 hours. I was the one who held him when his fever hit 104. I was the one who paid for the goddamn meningitis scare alone while you were at a luncheon. The words poured out of me hot as tears. I am the one who built a life for him, who taught him to read, who paid for his school, who loved him. Where were you? Where were you? You were calling him a burden. You were calling me selfish. You paid her to leave, and you call me the thief. There was silence. I had finally said it all. I had said the unspeakable. When he spoke again, his voice was no longer yelling. It was colder. It was deadlier. "We did what we had to do," he said, his voice a flat, cold line. "We protected you. And now you have gone too far. You have pushed this too far." He took a breath. "Blood is blood, Amina. That boy is a Reed whether you like it or not, and his mother wants to see him. His family wants to see him. You are going to let Kendra and Chad sit down with that boy. You are going to be civil. Or, as God is my witness, I will make you regret the day you ever thought you could cross me. This will not stand." The line went dead. It was not a plea. It was not a discussion. It was a threat. 2 weeks. That is how long I lived in the shadow of that threat. 2 weeks of hell. I did not sleep. I drank coffee until my hands shook. I put Leo on the bus to school and then watched the street for their beat-up BMW. I jumped every time my phone buzzed said. I called Jessica Hayes, my lawyer, and told her everything. She was tactical furious on my behalf. Let them come, she said, her voice sharp. They have no case. The adoption is sealed. It's final. They are blowing smoke, Amina. They are just trying to scare you. She was right, but I was still scared. I was at my office, my real office in Alpharetta, trying to focus on a new client's data set. I was staring at a spreadsheet but seeing my father's face. My assistant, a kind young woman named Maya, buzzed my intercom. Amina, I'm sorry to bother you, but there's a man here for you. He says he has a delivery. I frowned. I didn't order anything, Maya. He says it's personal, she said, her voice sounding nervous. He's a process server. The blood drained from my face. Send him in. The man was nondescript, wearing a polo shirt. He looked bored. Amina Reed, he asked. Yes. He handed me a thick folded stack of documents. You've been served. He turned and walked out. I just stood there, my hand frozen holding the papers. I walked back to my desk, my legs feeling like they were not connected to my body. I unfolded the thick official-looking document. My eyes scanned the legal jargon. Petition. Fulton County Superior Court. And then I saw it. The names. The plaintiffs. My eyes jumped past the first two names, the ones I was expecting. Kendra Peterson. Chad Peterson. And then my world, which was already cracked, split wide open. There were two more names on the plaintiff's line. David Reed and Maria Reed. It was not just them. It was all of them. My own parents were suing me. They were suing me to take my son. I sank into my chair, my vision tunneling as I read the accusation, the legal grounds for their case. They were petitioning to overturn the adoption. They were accusing me, of fraud, of undue influence. And the line that made me want to be sick. Intentional emotional alienation of the minor child from his loving biological family. Jessica, I said, my voice a dead monotone into the phone. They did it. They're all suing me. There was a sharp intake of breath on her end. Amina, what are the grounds? I read her the line. Fraud, alienation. Jessica said, her voice turning to steel. That's insane. It's impossible. The adoption is 2 years old. It's sealed. They have no standing. They were served the first time and didn't show up. What do they think they're doing? I stared at the paper. They're doing exactly what he said they'd do, I whispered. They're making me regret it. And that is when the real question hit me, the one that terrified me more than the lawsuit itself. They had no legal standing. They had no money. They had no case. So why? Why now? Why do this unless there was something new, unless they knew something I did not? I was on the phone with my lawyer, Jessica, my hand gripping the receiver so hard my knuckles were white. The lawsuit papers were spread out on my desk, a sea of black and white jargon that felt like a death threat. They're all suing me, Jessica, I said, my voice a dead monotone. All of them. My parents, too. There was a sharp intake of breath on her end. Fraud, alienation. Jessica's voice was pure steel. That's insane. It's impossible. The adoption is 2 years old. It's sealed. They have no standing. They were served the first time and didn't show up. What do they think they're doing? That was the question, the real question. Why now? Why this scorched earth attack after 10 years of silence? My data analyst brain, the part of me that sees patterns in chaos, kicked in. The fear started to recede, replaced by a cold, sharp, analytical focus. Jessica, I said, my voice steadying. They have no money. What? She asked. They have no money, I repeated, standing up and walking to my office window. I know my father's real estate business. It's leveraged to the hilt. He's drowning in debt. My mother's respectable life is built on credit. And Kendra, and that Chad, he's a shift manager at a rental car kiosk at the airport. Jessica was silent, processing. So how, I continued, are they paying for a high-powered, high-risk lawsuit like this? A lawsuit to unseal a finalized adoption? That's not cheap. That's $100,000 fight. A lawyer working on contingency, Jessica whispered, the realization dawning on her. They found a lawyer who's working for a piece of the pie. Exactly, I said. A lawyer only works on contingency if they expect a massive payday. The lawsuit isn't the cost. The lawsuit is the key. They're not spending money, Jessica. They're trying to get money. Get what money? Jessica asked. Your company Reed Analytics is successful, but it's not sue your own family successful. No, I said, looking out at the trees in my yard. It's not about me. It's about Leo. I was pacing now, my mind racing back 10 years ago. Back to the fights I'd had with Kendra before she vanished. Back to her crying in her trash-filled apartment. She was terrified, I whispered. She was running from someone. Who? Jessica asked. She told me about a guy. I said, my mind digging for the memory. A rich guy, a tech guy. She said he was powerful, that he'd ruin her. I thought she was just being dramatic. I thought it was another one of her stories. I stopped pacing. I sat down at my computer. I need to go, Jessica. I need to run some numbers. Amina, what are you? I'll call you back, I said, and hung up. I was not a mother, not a victim, not a sister. I was a data analyst. And I was on the hunt. I opened a new secure browser. I did not search for Kendra Reed. I did not search for Chad Peterson. I searched for the only piece of data I had. A name. A name she had sobbed into a pillow one night, a name I had dismissed and forgotten until this very second. She said he was a J, Jason Justin Julian. That was it. Julian Croft. I typed the name into the search bar. Julian Croft. And I pressed enter. The screen did not just fill, it exploded. My heart did not just stop, it felt like it had been ripped from my chest. This was not some small-time tech bro, this was the Julian Croft. The reclusive, eccentric genius billionaire founder of Aperture AI. The man whose software was probably running the search engine I was using. And the first headline, dated 6 months ago, screamed in bold black letters, Tech Titan, Julian Croft dead at 52. My blood ran cold. I clicked the link, my hand shaking so hard I could barely control the mouse. Died suddenly. Massive heart attack. I did not care about that. I scrolled down, my eyes scanning the article so fast I was barely breathing, looking for one word, one phrase, and I found it. Mr. Croft, who was known for his intensely private nature, never married, and leaves behind no known wife or children. No, that was wrong. I kept scrolling, another article, and another, and then I saw it, a gossip piece from a business journal dated 3 months ago. The $500 million estate who gets Julian Croft's fortune. I read the article. Sources close to the estate say Croft, who had no known heirs, left a famously complex will, but rumors are circulating of a possible, illegitimate child. I pushed back from my desk, my chair slamming into the wall. It all clicked into place. The dates, the timeline, the sheer naked, horrifying logic of it. Julian Croft dies 6 months ago. The news of a $500 million estate with a possible heir hits the news 3 months ago. And 1 month ago, my sober sister and her polyester suit-wearing husband show up on my doorstep. Chad. That bottom feeder. He must have read the news. He must have done the math. He had connected the dots. He had realized his new strung-out wife's abandoned baby was not a burden. He was a lottery ticket, a $500 million lottery ticket. Oh my God, I whispered to the empty room. They're not suing me for Leo, they're suing me for his money. I was going to be sick. They were going to drag my son, my 10-year-old boy, my baby, into a media circus to get their hands on his money. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling to call Jessica back to scream to tell her to panic. Jessica, I said, my voice trembling. I know why they're suing. It's not about custody. It's about money. It's $500 million. Leo's. Leo's biological father was Julian Croft. There was a sharp, terrified silence on the other end. Amina, Jessica said, and I could hear the panic in her voice now. Oh no. Oh God. This is bad. This is very bad. What do you mean? I asked, my own fear rising. Amina, they're going to argue fraud. Jessica's voice was rapid fire, all business. They're going to say, you knew. They're going to say, you knew about this inheritance when you filed for adoption 2 years ago. They'll say you intentionally concealed the child's massive financial status from the court. They'll say that's the fraud. They'll say you did it just to control the money, Amina. A judge might listen to that. I was choking. I could not breathe. She was right. They had a weapon. They could paint me as a liar, a manipulator, a gold digger, the very things they were. My whole life, my fortress, my company. It was all about to crumble. I was pacing my office, my vision tunneling. No, I said, stopping. Wait. The panic. It was receding. It was being replaced by something else. A cold, hard, familiar feeling. The feeling I got when I found the $50,000 receipt. The feeling I got when I blocked my mother's number. Amina, what? Jessica said, her voice still frantic. They can't win, I said. They won't win. How do you know they'll say you hid? They don't know everything, Jessica, I said, and my voice was calm. The shaking had stopped. They think they're the only ones who read the news. They don't know the real story. What real story? I walked over to the bookshelf in my office. I pulled out a thick volume on data structures. And behind it, I activated the keypad for the small fireproof wall safe I had installed 2 years ago. Julian Croft didn't just die, I said, my voice steady. He found me, a year before he passed. He was smart, Jessica. He ran his own data. He was a billionaire for a reason. He found me, and he found Leo. I remembered the meeting, a quiet park in Alpharetta. Not a billionaire, just a man with tired, kind eyes watching his 10-year-old son play. He met him, I said, my voice thick with the memory. He met Leo, and I told him everything. I told him about Kendra. I told him about the $50,000. I told him about the Burden phone call. I showed him the receipt. Amina. He knew exactly what my family was, Jessica. He knew this day would come. He knew they were vipers. And Julian Croft, he was a very, very careful man. He did not just leave a will, Jessica. He left an insurance policy. My fingers closed around a thick, sealed manila envelope. The one he had given me. The one that said, "Do not open unless they come for him." Julian left me a weapon, I said. He called it his contingency plan. I call it the trap. And my family, my greedy, stupid, monstrous family, they just walked right into it. The Fulton County Superior Courthouse is not a warm place. It is all marble and dark wood and cold, echoing silence. I sat next to my lawyer, Jessica. My hands clasped so tightly my knuckles were white. Across the aisle they sat, a united, horrifying front. Kendra dressed in a modest pale blue dress, looking like a church choir member. Chad, her white husband, in his shiniest suit, looking protective, a righteous man defending his new wife. And my parents, David and Maria Reed. They looked like they were attending a funeral, pained, somber, dignified. They looked like the victims. The judge, a sharp woman named Judge Alston, looked over the case. "We are here," she said, her voice cutting through the tension, "on the petition of Kendra Peterson, Chad Peterson, David Reed, and Maria Reed, to vacate a finalized adoption based on allegations of fraud. I felt sick. Jessica placed a calming hand on my arm. "Let them talk," she whispered. "Let them lie. Every word is a shovel, and they are digging their own graves." Their lawyer called his first witness, my sister, Kendra. She glided to the stand, her hand trembling just enough for the judge to see. She took the oath. "Ms. Peterson," her lawyer began, his voice dripping with sympathy. "Can you tell the court what happened 10 years ago?" Kendra looked at the judge, her eyes wide and wet. "Your Honor," she whispered, her voice cracking perfectly. I was not well. I was just a girl and I had terrible postpartum depression. I was lost. I was terrified." She took a breath. "I did not know what to do. So I went to the only person I thought I could trust. My big sister, Amina." She pointed at me, and I felt the eyes of the court on me. "I went to her for help," she sobbed. "I begged her, 'Can you just help me? Can you watch him for a little while, just until I can get on my feet?' And what did she say?" her lawyer asked, feeding her the line. "She said yes. She said she would help," Kendra cried. "So I left him with her. I trusted her. And then, she broke down." Chad from his seat looked on with righteous fury. "And then what, Miss Peterson? And then she cut me off." Kendra's voice rose, a performance of pure betrayal. "She vanished. She changed her number. She moved away. She stole my son. She took advantage of my sickness, of my moment of weakness, and she stole him." The lawyer let that hang in the air. "Did you ever at any time consent to giving up your child?" "No," she shrieked. "Never. I would have crawled over broken glass. I did not even know about the adoption until 6 months ago. She lied to me. She tricked me. She kept my son from me. She kept him from his family." I was gripping the edge of the table so hard my fingers ached. Lies. All of it. A perfect, polished, rehearsed performance of lies. The judge just watched, her face impossible to read. When Kendra stepped down, my father, David Reed, was called to the stand. He walked up not as a father but as the CEO he was. He looked respectable. He looked pained. He looked like the voice of reason. "Mr. Reed," his lawyer said, "this must be very difficult for you. Why are you here today suing your own daughter?" My father sighed, a deep, sad, burdened sound. "Your Honor," he said, his voice the perfect blend of strength and sadness, "we are a good family, a close family. We raised our girls to love each other. But Amina—" He looked at me, and it was not a look of love. It was a look of cold assessment. "Amina has always been difficult." There it was, the word that had defined my entire life. Difficult for getting straight A's. Difficult for not being a socialite. Difficult for building a business instead of finding a husband. She holds grudges," my father continued, shaking his head. "She's isolating. When Kendra in her sickness made a mistake, Amina did not see a cry for help. She saw an opportunity to take something." "We tried, Your Honor," he said, his voice full of false sincerity. "We tried to connect. We tried to be part of the boy's life. But Amina, she blocked our numbers. She moved without telling us. She poisoned that child against us, against his own mother, against a family who loves him." I could feel the rage bubbling in my chest. "Loves him," I thought. "You called him a burden." "We are not here for money," my father lied, looking the judge dead in the eye. "We are here for our grandson. We just want what's best for him. We want him to know his real family. His whole family. He was good. He was better than Kendra. He was believable. He was the successful, respectable, heartbroken patriarch just trying to mend his broken family, a family torn apart by his difficult daughter." My mother Maria was in the front row, nodding along, dabbing a dry eye with a pristine white tissue. It was a perfect performance. Their lawyer sat down looking smug. The air in the room was heavy thick with their lies. The judge looked at my lawyer. Ms. Hayes, your witness. Jessica stood up. She was not a performer. She was a surgeon. Ms. Peterson, she said, her voice calm, please return to the stand. Kendra, looking fragile again, did as she was told. Ms. Peterson, you testified you were lost and confused due to postpartum depression when you left Leo. Is that correct? Yes, Kendra whispered. I was very sick. Were you lost and confused 2 days later? Jessica asked, her voice like ice. When you flew to Los Angeles and opened a new bank account. Kendra froze. I don't remember. And were you lost and confused when you accepted a wire transfer for $50,000? Chad sat up. My father stopped breathing. I, that was family helping me, Kendra stammered. Was it? Jessica said. She held up Exhibit A. This is a bank statement from an account belonging to Amina Reed, an account that shows a $50,000 withdrawal authorized by David Reed and transferred to your new account in Los Angeles, 2 days after you abandoned your son. Kendra was pale. It was a gift. It was a transaction, Ms. Peterson, Jessica said. You did not ask for help. You were paid to disappear, and you used your sister's own savings to do it. A murmur went through the court. And Mr. Reed, Jessica said, not even letting the shock settle. Please take the stand. My father, his face now a blotchy, angry red, stalked to the witness box. Mr. Reed, you testified you always tried to connect, that you are a loving grandfather. That is correct, he bit out. We love that boy. A loving grandfather, Jessica repeated. Is this your voice, Mr. Reed? She held up a small digital recorder. Exhibit B. Objection, their lawyer yelled. Hearsay, improper foundation. It has been authenticated, Your Honor, Jessica said calmly. The witness's own phone records obtained under subpoena confirm this call. The judge waved a hand. I'll allow it. Play the tape. And Jessica played it. The sound of my father's voice 10 years ago filled the silent courtroom. Cold, hard, furious. She chose your door, Amina, the recording boomed. That makes it your problem. He is your burden now. Do not call this house about this again. The click of the phone hanging up echoed in the room. My mother, Maria, let out a small strangled gasp. My father, David Reed, was speechless. His respectable mask had been ripped off. A burden, Mr. Reed, Jessica asked. Is that what loving grandparents say? Before he could answer, she said, and just one more. Exhibit C. This is the call from 5 years ago, the one my client made from the Eagleston Hospital. When she thought her son was dying, she played the second recording. My mother's voice cold and sharp. Amina, I am in the middle of my annual women's club luncheon. I cannot just leave. You are always so dramatic. Stop being selfish. You chose him. Now you handle it. Click. The courtroom was dead silent. My parents, they were exposed. Not as loving grandparents, but as the monsters they truly were. The courtroom was absolutely silent. The echo of my mother's voice, "You handle it," was still hanging in the air, thick and toxic. My father was rigid, his face a mask of purple, apoplectic rage. My mother was staring at the floor, her respectable image in tatters. Their lawyer, a thin, weasel-faced man, was shuffling his papers, his face pale. He was lost. His entire case, the loving family narrative, had just been vaporized by 2 audio files. I saw Chad, the polyester suit husband, lean in. He whispered something to the lawyer, his face furious, jabbing a finger toward the judge. He was reminding the lawyer of the real goal. The lawyer looked up desperate. He had lost the argument on character. He had only one card left to play. And blinded by panic, he played it. Your Honor, he shouted, jumping to his feet, his voice squeaking. This is all just a distraction, a character assassination. This is not what this case is about. Judge Alston looked at him over her glasses, her eyes like chips of ice. Is it not, counselor? You are the one who brought a petition based on emotional alienation and loving family ties. Your client's own words seem to contradict that. So what exactly is this case about? And there it was. The mistake. The fatal, greedy, stupid mistake. Their lawyer, backed into a corner, blurted out the truth. It's about the child's rights, Your Honor, he declared, puffing out his chest. His rights to his heritage, his rights to his legacy. Jessica stiffened next to me. The judge's eyes narrowed. His legacy. What legacy? The legacy of his biological father, the lawyer proclaimed as if this were his winning move. A man he has never known. A man, this woman. He pointed at me, concealed from the court. We are here to protect this child's inheritance. His $500 million inheritance from the estate of the late Julian Croft. Boom! The word fraud was now recontextualized. The silence in the courtroom was different now. It was not shock, it was disgust. The judge's face, which had been angry, was now cold. She finally understood. The motive was not love, it was money. Judge Alston stared at the lawyer, then at my parents, then at Kendra, then at Chad. She saw the whole greedy picture. She let the words $500 million hang in the air for a long, ugly moment. Then her eyes moved. She turned, her entire body swiveling in her high-backed chair. She turned to me. Her voice was no longer sharp, it was quiet, it was analytical. Ms. Reed, she said. This was it. The moment from the teaser. My heart was pounding, but I was not afraid. I was ready. You heard the plaintiff's counsel. He has made an accusation, a very serious one, that you knew of this massive inheritance and concealed it from the court when you filed for adoption 2 years ago. I took a breath. I stood up. I did not look at my family. I did not look at their lawyer. I looked at the judge. Yes, Your Honor, I said, my voice clear and steady. I knew. The lawyer for my family actually let out a triumphant, "Aha!" Chad was grinning. They thought they had me. And, I continued, I also knew this day would come, because Julian Croft knew. The judge's eyebrows went up. Mr. Croft knew. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Croft did not just die. He found me a year before he passed. He met his son. I told him everything. I told him about my sister. I told him about my parents. I showed him the $50,000 receipt. I played him the burden phone call. He was a data analyst, Your Honor. He understood patterns. He knew exactly what kind of people they were. I reached down into the briefcase at my feet. He knew that the moment he died, the moment his name was connected to an inheritance, that the vipers would come. I pulled out a thick 9x12 manila envelope sealed with red wax. He anticipated this exact lawsuit. He anticipated the fraud allegation, and he prepared for it. He asked me to give this to the presiding judge and only the judge in the event that any member of Kendra Reed's biological family. I glanced at my parents, ever tried to contest my custody of Leo. I walked forward and handed the sealed folder to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. The courtroom was so quiet, I could hear the air conditioning. Judge Alston took a letter opener and slit the envelope. She pulled out a thick bound document. It was not a letter. It was a legal addendum. She began to read, her eyes scanning the page, and then scanning again faster. I watched her face. Her eyes widened. She looked up from the paper, her gaze sweeping over Kendra, Chad, David, and Maria. Her expression was not just angry, it was one of pure, profound disbelief. She looked back at me. Ms. Reed, she asked, her voice hushed with the weight of what she was reading. Do they have any idea what this is? Do they know what you have? No, Your Honor, I said. They do not. The judge shook her head as if to clear it. She looked back at the plaintiffs. You people, you are truly unbelievable. She took a deep breath. This, she said, holding up the document, is a legally binding addendum to the last will and testament of Julian Croft, authenticated, notarized, and filed with his estate. She began to read aloud. First, I, Julian Croft, confirm that Leo Reed is my biological son. I saw Chad grin a hungry, vicious smile. He thought he had won. The judge continued. Second, I bequeath my entire estate valued at approximately $500 million to be placed into a secured ironclad trust for my son Leo Reed to be managed solely, she emphasized the word, by his legal and only mother, Ms. Amina Reed, until his 25th birthday. Chad's grin widened. He did not care. He could get me declared unfit later. And third, the judge said, her voice dropping and her eyes locking onto my family. However, and that one word, the word the trap sprung on, in the event that any member of Leo's biological mother's family, specifically named as Kendra Reed, Chad Peterson, David Reed, or Maria Reed, ever attempts to contest the custody of Amina Reed, or attempts to interfere with her management of the trust, or files any legal action to that effect. The judge paused and then delivered the final fatal line. 99%, 99, of the entire $500 million estate is to be immediately and irrevocably liquidated from Leo's trust and redirected to a charitable foundation for abandoned children to be managed again by Ms. Amina Reed. Silence. Utter, complete, deafening silence. Chad's smile was gone, frozen on his face, his brain trying to catch up. Kendra's face was white. My father, David, just stared. No! Chad finally screamed, leaping up from his chair. No! That's illegal. You can't do that. Kendra let out a sound I had never heard before, a long, high-pitched wail as she realized what had just happened, and she slid boneless from the bench in a dead faint. My mother just made a small, choking sound. My father, he just looked at me. And I looked back. He finally understood. They had not just lost their payday. Their greed, their attack, their lawsuit had just cost my son $500 million. They had done it. Order! Judge Alston boomed, gaveling over Chad's screams. Order in the court. Your petition, she said, her voice dripping with contempt, is not just dismissed. It is dismissed with prejudice. I am finding you all in contempt. This was a frivolous, malicious, and greedy abuse of the court system. She looked at me and her face softened just for a second. Ms. Reed, you are free to go with your son. The most powerful lesson from this story is that true strength often looks like quiet diligence. Amina's family saw her as a burden, but they never saw her as a data analyst. She didn't just endure, she documented. She saved the bank statement. She saved the audio files. She built her life on truth while they built theirs on lies and respectability. The ultimate payoff wasn't just the justice in court. It was the revelation that their own greed was the trap. They were so blinded by the $500 million they destroyed themselves. Have you ever had to be the responsible one in your family? And how did you finally build your own fortress? Share your story in the comments below.